Over the past few months, I've been putting together this Overlander setup for our family camping trips. What we've got here is this luxury 4x4. It's a Land Rover Discovery 3. It sleeps 4. The whole setup is completely self-contained. We've got water on board, we've got the toilet. We are set up here for true off-grid camping setups. So this Land Rover Discovery 3, I think, is actually one of the absolute best choices for this kind of setup. If you're sleeping on the car in a roof tent or in a sleeping platform in the car, you want to make sure the car is level, and obviously faffing about with ramps is quite a hassle. So having this 4x4 with air suspension with its massive suspension travel gives it the ability to self-level. Now they can't do this from the factory, they need a little third-party gizmo, and there's a company called Land Rover Passion that makes these kits for this, and they kindly sent me one to test out. So it connects to your phone over Bluetooth, and with the push of a button you can just level the car. A brilliant basis for this kind of project. So first up, let's look at my new Dashcam. If you've ever been to the Dashcam Talk website, which is my go-to website for kind of comparisons and reviews on dashcams, you'll have spotted 70mi as this kind of market leader who are coming at the top of the recommendations on that website all the time. In fact, the A810 model that I'm looking at now is the top choice in this best bang for your buck category at the moment. Dashcams are always a bit of a daunting thing to look at because there are just so many of them. You don't really know where your value is going. But once you dig a little bit deeper, you'll see that they kind of all share the same sensors. There's a bit of a progression in the industry as new sensors are made available. And what's interesting is actually Sony seem to be dominating the sensors in the dashcam market. Even though all the dashcams are different brands, it's still Sony sensors that seem to get used in the best dashcams. So the A810 by 70mi is actually powered by a new sensor from Sony called the Starvis 2. And this is normally a sensor that's in much more expensive dashcams. And its real claim to fame is this full 4K HDR video quality from the front camera, and the rear camera still gives you 1080p HDR as well. And the quality from this sensor really is spectacular. Obviously I'll put in some sample footage from my camera here. This is by far the best image quality out of any dashcam I've ever seen. Now, I'm a big fan of using the proper hardwire kits when you install a dashcam in your car. Interestingly, with this camera, you can actually get it with a 4G hardwire kit. So it's your normal kind of hardwire wiring kit with connections to your fuses that you would normally do. So one to your ignition switch and one to a permanent live. But it's also got this 4G module that lets you put a SIM card in it, and it will then have a permanent internet connection. And that's really cool because it obviously lets the parking guard functionality have kind of superpowers in that you can see alerts on your phone when something has happened when you've left your car parked. And of course the whole system is monitoring your battery voltage in the car and will shut that down if the battery voltage ever gets too low. And interestingly, you can choose your own threshold at which you want that to happen. And reassuringly, all of those voltages are actually the proper kind of settings that you'd want to use for a 12-volt car battery. A lot of them I've seen on other hardwire kits are sort of really low, like 11 volts, 11.5 volts, so that's way too low. You don't ever want your battery getting in that territory. The settings here in the app that you can set for your cutoff here are much more sensible. One of the things I miss about having my Tesla is obviously the Sentry mode system that will pick up any activity around the car, and you can look back at that footage later. Now that I've got this dashcam in the Land Rover, I'm getting the same kind of functionality. So this uses AI to analyze the footage from the camera, and if it thinks there's a problem, it will actually start recording that and send an alert to your phone, and you can view that clip on your phone or connect to the camera directly and view its live feed from your phone. And this is all possible using the dashcam's own connection, using its 4G hardwire kit. And what I really like about this dash camera is actually how everything is fully configurable in its own app. Obviously with a dash cam that's permanently mounted to a really awkward place in your car, you don't want to be fiddling with the screen and buttons on there. It's very awkward to change settings on a dash cam normally because of that. Whereas obviously with the app, you can just connect straight to it. And not only can you view all of the footage and download all the files using the app, you don't have to take the card out, which is obviously what I'm used to doing with older dash cams. You can just do it all straight through your phone, including having full access to all of the configuration for the dash cam as well. So that just transforms the workflow of using a dash cam like this. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And the app makes it really easy to browse all of the footage on there and save those clips as well. And what's interesting is it has this kind of event thing, and this is basically as good as my security camera at home, where it will categorize all the events and the times, and you can click through and play the clips. You get that with the app on this, and that's really cool. And of course you can see the car's location in the app using that 4G and GPS connectivity with the dash camera in there as well. Now obviously I'm not a reviewer who's looked at many different dash cams, but I'm really happy to recommend this one because I trust the Dashcam Talk website website who've done all the hard work comparing all the dash cams, and this one scores really highly on that website. And combined with my own experience with this review unit, I'm absolutely happy to recommend this. I think it's a fantastic dash camera for the price. You know, it's got this Sony sensor in, it's got all the app functionality and the incredible image quality. It's everything you need in a dash cam. Really happy to have it in the Land Rover here as part of the project. So we've got these two Dabbsson power stations that are kind of powering out the whole setup here. And the really interesting thing about these is that you can use this thing to connect them both. And what that does is increase the total output power. So they can power about 1300 watts individually by themselves. With this, that goes up to 2000 watts, which of course is enough for the induction cooker. So that's just absolutely fantastic. And they have the 12 volt output, which powers the fridge in here. And then when we're driving around, these are charging up from the 12 volts here as well. And then obviously when we're at a camp setup, we can have the solar panels. Kind of hazy day like today, both these panels are putting in 70 watts of input, while this is drawing it's on 500 watts output at the moment, just simmering here. So this low heat mode is a little bit annoying. You can see it clicking on and off. So this is 1000 watts like that, and then it clicks off completely and it sort of stops. So I don't know what the average temperature or what the temperature is really doing to that water in this mode, but this is its lowest mode, and it's obviously not a sort of genuine low mode. That's at 1300 watts now. And that looks to be a constant. That's, I think, the lowest constant output. This whole setup is really obviously a maths game. You've got to work out if using the induction cooker is going to take out more than you're going to be able to put back in. So you're driving the car a little bit in the day, obviously you're putting some back in from the cigarette lighter. If you're then at the campsite, you're putting a bit back in from the solar. But this thing is putting 2000 watts when you're using it in the evenings and in the mornings maybe as well, which means after a couple of days, it's probably going to be using a lot more than you're putting back in. So this whole setup works really well for us. The goal of this thing being just to do 1 or 2 night camps where we're coming with these pre-charged fully from home. This whole setup just works really well, because the key with the induction cooking is it's actually perfect for a camping setup. It's instant heat, and it's completely impervious to wind. This boils a litre of water in under 3 minutes, and you know, irrespective of whether it's windy or not. And I think that is just absolutely fantastic for this kind of a setup. So Dabbsson really kindly sent me these. I've done another video on these devices. I think they are absolutely brilliant, and they'll happily power this fridge over 12 volts as well, so you don't even need the AC inverter running for that kind of a fridge. And the 12 volt fridge in here, which just fits in the sleeping platform. This is the slightly larger size with a bit of extra storage space inside the lid here. That just runs on 12 volts over the cigarette lighter cable there. And I was umming and ahhing about whether or not to get just a cooler or have one of these, but obviously with the battery setup, it seemed too good an opportunity to miss. So I went for the 12 volt fridge, and yeah, it's been absolutely brilliant. So the solar panels are connected up to this unit here, and it's saying there's 206 watts going into this at the moment. This is on full 2 kilowatt output to boil the water, which it's now doing. I'm going to turn that down to low heat. So we're getting 200 from the sun, we're using 500, so we're only taking out 300 watts from these at the moment. These started off, before I started cooking, these were about 80% each. This one with the solar input is now at 67, and this one without the solar input is at 62. So you can kind of see the impact of that. But they're splitting the output into there equally. So the camping coffee setup was something I spent a great deal of time thinking about. We normally use a French press at home, but I actually thought that in a camping setup was going to be a disaster. It's just too messy for the cleanup. And then as it happened, this company called Outin offered to send me one of these. And I saw that it could do both proper espresso with freshly ground coffee, as well as using pods. And I thought this is going to be something that's going to be really interesting to look at. Obviously using pods in a camping setup is super convenient. So let's look at what this can do in a camping setup first. So the main kind of appeal with this device for camping is you don't even have to heat your water first. So I'm just going to make an espresso with a pod to show you that process, and I'm going to use cold water, and that's the really cool thing about this. In a camping environment, you haven't even got to preheat your water. So you just take a pod and you pop that in the bottom there, sit that in there and tighten that up. And then you can just put in, it recommends that you put in 50 milliliters in the top here. So that's what we'll do. Okay, and then you pop the lid on the top. And then you can put the cup on the bottom, and then it will sit like that quite happily now. And then so to get this to do from cold, you just hold down the button until you hear the beep, and then you can just wait. I think what's really surprised me about this device is how many different ways of using it I've found. You know, I was kind of thinking it would be the ideal camping setup with the pods and we'd just leave it there, but it's actually so good and the coffee is so enjoyable. The whole process of actually using freshly ground coffee with the scales and the grinder has meant we've adopted this in our normal house coffee routine now. I was just about to pump. And then when you think about its other uses of sort of just taking it with you to have a fresh coffee when you're out and about, or taking it up to bed the night before, it's just got so many interesting uses. And that's done. You see the steam coming out there. And one of the things they say on the website for this is that because it's got this 20 bar pump, you get this super thick luxury crema layer. I think the option just to have an espresso straight out of the machine like that in the morning in no time at all is just amazing. So I'm going to do an Americano now, which means obviously I need some hot water as well as what this will do. So with that in mind, if I am going to be boiling the water separately, I might as well save the battery in this and put the boiling water in this and then just have this pump. So that's what we'll do with this setup. So that's 1 mug of water in there. So I'm going to weigh out about 8.5 grams. I've got 8.8 there. A lot of people said to grind at espresso fineness takes ages with a hand grinder. It's not true at all. Not with a decent hand grinder like this one. So then you've got this little basket that you put the ground coffee in. It comes with this little scoop, which you use as a tamper as well. You know, I'm sort of aiming for 30-second extraction time with this amount of coffee, and I'm going for the 30 ml. So I know it's not really like a true espresso ratio. You can do it like that if you want to, you know, get almost 9 grams of coffee in there. If you wanted to stop it at 18, then you could, but you can kind of just, you know, you're free to make those experiments with this. That's the fun thing here, really. Just going to bring that back up to the boil. So what I'm going to do with this one, I'll just go straight into there and we can time the process and see the yield as well. That's done. So because I'm just going to have this pump and not do the heating, I'm going to double tap. The scales are set to start the timer automatically as soon as it detects the weight, so that should work fine. You can see I've just, you know, going with the grind size that I've got dialed in here, I'm just getting a nice steady flow. So that's saying 31 grams of coffee in there now, and just about 30 seconds. So that's what I've been aiming for. And then obviously we can turn it into our Americano. So that's the kind of routine that I do actually at home, but obviously it works just as well in this camping setup. And I've got a 10% discount code, by the way, in the description. You'll feel free to use that. For the money, you know, it works incredibly well as a household espresso machine and a portable espresso machine that works with pods or freshly ground coffee. I'm just so impressed with it, I really am. I don't think there's anything else in this category. There are a couple of other handheld ones where they don't heat it and they don't even pump it. You've got to squeeze a thing and, you know, all these kinds of things. This can just do everything in one, and it's no bigger than a flask. It's just a pretty mind-blowing piece of kit, really. CarPlay integration is one of the biggest issues with old cars like this 2008 Land Rover. Software design goes out of date way faster than hardware design. So retrofitting CarPlay into old cars like this, you know, it is possible to use the existing screen. So it has got a color screen on the dash, you know, it is in its original form. And it is possible to get a full kit that you can kind of you know, put CarPlay onto that screen. And those kits are actually really expensive. And that's where this device from Carpodgo comes in. So its price is about 1/3 of the cost of these proper retrofit kits, but it gives you a screen that's actually fantastic by today's standards. So it's really big, it's really bright, and it's very high resolution and incredibly fast refresh rate and very responsive to touch as well. And what's interesting about this is there's obviously quite a few of these kind of CarPlay screens on the market, but Carpodgo make this claim that their screen is extremely high quality automotive grade display, which isn't the case for a lot of the cheaper ones that you see kicking around on Amazon. And that's really interesting, and I'm really impressed with the display on this. It genuinely is very bright. And what's brilliant about this approach is how simple and flexible it is to install. There's no invasive process involved like you would if you were installing a proper retrofit kit. All it actually needs, in fact, is USB-C power, and that's it. So the best way that this would work is if you use Bluetooth for the phone's audio, and this, you know, is fully supported by the iPhone, is that it can work with CarPlay for the display and use Bluetooth for its audio and music calls. And this screen works really nicely in that configuration. So with cars as old as this that don't actually have Bluetooth, what you can do is just use a simple Bluetooth adapter to go into the auxiliary input, and that sends all the audio from Bluetooth through to that. And of course it has a little microphone in that dongle as well, so it can work for calls and audio. Now that isn't the only way you can actually use this. You can actually connect the display itself directly to the auxiliary input for the car, and if you do that, then the screen itself has its own little microphone on the back, so that's how it would work with calls and audio. But if the car is so old that it doesn't have an auxiliary input, which rules out these options, you can actually use the FM transmitter that's built into the screen as well. And the hardware itself, it feels super solid. What's nice about it is it has a really strong magnetic attachment. It comes with a whole range of different ways of mounting this. I'm using this kind of long arm so that it can sucker onto the windscreen and then still position quite near the front of the dash for me to use it. But the screen itself's got just a really strong magnetic attachment to these mounting methods, which means you can quickly pop it off and put it in the glove box if you don't want to just leave it on display all the time. So this Carpodgo unit is definitely now my recommended approach for retrofitting CarPlay to older cars. It's interesting, you know, this is a good example of the hardware and software thing. The sound system in this car is really good, so not being able to use my YouTube Music subscription with it is kind of always a massive hassle, or just struggling with voice only over Siri and Bluetooth. Adding the CarPlay screen with the proper YouTube Music app on here just transforms the experience. Absolutely brilliant. So it's worth talking about toilets. Now, one of the things I wanted to set up with this rig was I wanted to be able to get away from normal campsites and go to these kind of more off-grid sort of secret locations where there's just one or two pitches, and they're on special websites that you can go to track these out. I'll link to those in the description below. But they sound really nice, and I really wanted to kind of explore what's required to get to those places. And part of that is being fully self-contained, so all of your waste going with you, including toilet waste. So to do that, I was sort of thinking, you know, what kind of options are there? You know, there's a few different routes out there, but the classic Porta Potti toilet, as used by caravans and all the rest of it for years, it still seems to be the best option. I'm super happy with it, the way it works. Other people have gone into more details about the nitty-gritty. I won't go too in depth. But the main thing is just how compact the unit is and how sealed the unit is. It's absolutely completely sealed, in, you know, so much that you can not worry when you put it back in the car, and you can dispose of it down the toilet when you get home. And that's the kind of simplest route that I figured out with all of this. And it doesn't take up a huge amount of space. It just sits on the top there. And of course, you know, this is one of these things that wouldn't be able to be moved forward under the sleeping platform. But obviously when you arrive at your campsite, this comes out of the car. So it doesn't matter, actually, as long as you can store it in the back when you're driving. You don't need to worry about the space it takes up when you convert the inside sleeping platform. And then, so it's just a question of just having a little pop-up tent for privacy. I had an old pop-up tent that I used to use with wildlife filmmaking, which we're just using for that purpose here, but you can get kind of brighter, lighter pop-up privacy toilet tents, which might do the job better. This was the final piece of the puzzle to get this as a fully self-contained Overlander camper. My wife and I actually lived on a narrowboat for a year, so we kind of had a bit of experience with off-grid toilet systems. I think what it allows you to do when you get into this kind of territory is just really cool, actually. So this is a family camping setup for 4. So 2 of us sleep in there, my wife and I sleep in the roof tent up there, and we got the sleeping platform in the car for the kids. Now the roof tent is this YOUNGHUNTER product, and I'm absolutely really excited to have found this. This was supplied to me for free. I've done a full review video on this, so I won't spend too much time in this video talking about it, but essentially it's a really comfortable sleeping tent for 2 people. It just pops up really fast. It's got a mattress built in and a condensation mat underneath and everything you'd expect from a really high quality rooftop tent like this. And the beauty of it is that it's the hard shell style of tent, which means you can just close it and open it in seconds. And I think that's what a lot of people don't really understand. The difference between the hard shells and the soft shells is that the convenience with these is just so much more significant than it is with the soft shells, where you have to remove this tarpaulin every time you want to put it up and down. If you're going to a campsite and you want to use your vehicle in the day, you need to be able to get the rooftop tent down quickly in the morning, and these hard shell style tents are just so good at that. And they look so tidy and neat and sleek on top of the car as well. So definitely the best kind of roof tent style, I think, here for the Overlander format. So the plywood structure here that we can see being used for storage is actually what turns into the sleeping platform for the 2 kids. The whole thing slides back. Again, I've done another dedicated video on this, so I won't go into too much detail here. But it works really well as a storage system here, just with these 2 big spaces here. And then the top platform slides forward. And I've come up with a really interesting little mechanism for the way this top piece clicks onto the bottom piece when it slides forward. Yeah, and it is obviously exactly the same level as the roof tent. I kind of made sure that all was the case. Unfortunately, the floor is not the same level as the roof tent, so I had to build this on a slight slope, but I've gone into the whole process of that in the other video. But yeah, you know, it's obviously, this is a very big square car, so it's perfectly suitable for 2 people to sleep in this once you create that platform. So the front seat slides slightly forward, and that allows for the full 2-meter bed, just made up of this piece stacked on top of the other bit. That slides back to the front, and then you've got the 2-meter bed there. And you can see the bedding rolls, just 2 self-inflating mattresses with sheets that my mum made to go over that, and they just roll out and let them inflate a little bit before the kids go on them in the night time. So obviously at the moment all we're doing is kind of just storing all of the kitchen stuff in these 2 boxes, which just slide in the storage box under there. I think at some stage I might go down the road of having proper pull-out drawers with everything in its right place and everything all plugged in with the hob on the top and all of that, but it's going to take some time just to get a good understanding of exactly what I want. For now I'm quite happy with the flexibility of just having these kind of big open storage boxes that we can just chuck in there, and there's enough room for them to kind of spill out a little bit over the top. Cutlery, just cheap IKEA cutlery. Best bang for the buck for cheap cutlery I think I've found. And one of the things that obviously when you're camping is you need a kind of decent light source, like this whole setup here at the back of the car with the tailgate that folds down. This is kind of useful workspace, but if it's dark you can't really see what you're doing. And I've actually found these little lights that IKEA have started doing, and I think they're absolutely brilliant. They're a really warm light color temperature, and a lot of little LED lights, a horrible sort of cool blue color, and I think that's a pretty awful setup. Whereas these are really warm, and they actually look really natural in the quality. And I think that is the case with a lot of IKEA LEDs. I actually use their bulbs in our house at home for the smart lighting as well, and I've always been really pleased with the quality of the white. You know, they haven't got any tint. And these being a really nice warm white light, actually brilliant as well for this kind of setup. I'll probably work out a final place for these to stick up here or something like that eventually, and these will just run off the big batteries, of course, over USB. So once these are stuck onto a place, you just literally just squeeze them, push them, and they turn on and off. And you can see that color temperature there, really warm white light. Obviously, when you've got people sleeping in a vehicle, ventilation is important. You want to try and minimize the condensation on the inside, but also it's good to have a bit of fresh air in such a small space. So we just got a super simple solution here. I've seen a lot of people that have the little things that you put the window down and they clip in there. They're quite expensive and a bit of a faff. I kind of thought simple solution, stick these on and then just get the little mesh things that you use for window blinds in cars, and then they just pull that over the top of the door, and that kind of creates a bug-proof system and allows you to have the window down a couple of inches on all 4 windows, and that just works really well. So I think the camping table is worth a quick mention. It's just something I've had from Camper. I've had it for ages. We lugged it around when we were using the bell tent as our camping table. I think this style really excellent actually. So it's got 4 legs and each one individually adjustable in terms of height. It's way too heavy, you know, it's not ideal. It is a very heavy thing, and it's not aging super well. It's kind of all cracking, but it still actually seems to serve the purpose pretty well. Again, a lot of people are going for these sort of ultralight small pack size folding tables, and I think they're just a lot of hassle, and they don't all have a sensible way of adjusting the angle. You need a table with all 4 corners with adjustable angles so that you can get this level. There's nothing worse than a table that's not sitting level and you put your beer on it and it slides off and it's gone. So critical that your camp table has the ability to be leveled at all 4 corners. Again, this was a very cheap table, but it's interesting how that approach with the leg design has just made it so functional that we're just still hanging on to it in spite of it kind of falling apart and it being pretty heavy. So I'm really, really pleased with this water container. There's not many on the market that have this kind of set of design features. You've got the little air inlet valve here, again, which when you're traveling is still on the top, so you're not going to lose a load of water out of there, but you do want the little rubber cap on that. Super easy to fill with a giant opening on the top here, and then a nice little tap when you're using it. You can just use it like that, obviously opening that. Whoa, let's turn this down. It's ferociously hot. And then obviously, you know, you can get that last bit of water out just with a little tilt like that. Nice and square, very easy to pack, just brilliant. Super cheap on Amazon. Links to all of this stuff in the description below as well. This is interesting. Over the years I've experimented with a lot of different kinds of camping chairs. I actually bought quite a few that I've kind of regretted, and we'll just be selling those now. A lot of YouTubers talk about these really tiny lightweight camp chairs, and I've actually tried a few of those as well, and they're so small and you feel like you're going to tip over on the back of them. These things, obviously they're not super small, but they're perfect for a car camping setup where space isn't a sort of super premium, and they just, you know, pop out like that. And I've found even really expensive chairs just can't compete with this in terms of how comfortable they are. This edge here doesn't cut into your thighs, and all the camping chairs I've tried, this is a real problem. If that's not a problem, then you get kind of squished in. The sides are too tight here. Again, not a problem here. This point here, another issue. Normally you can feel that cutting into your back. Doesn't happen with this chair. And then you can just sit back into it nicely like this. And this angle here is just enough that this doesn't cause too much for pressure there. And you can kind of sit back on it and you don't feel you're going to tip over. Everything about it is just brilliant. So in terms of shelter out of the rain, the whole point of this tent setup is that the sleeping area is just for sleeping. We haven't then got a daytime kind of shelter area like we would have if we had the bell tent. So I'm kind of experimenting with a little awning tarp like this. And when I first set this up, I had it connected to the car, and that was a massive issue because the rain from the top of the roof tent there dripped down and then hit the top of the tarp, and it was just really noisy all night. So I'm thinking what we're doing now is going to have the tarp separate from the car so that the rain can just drip off there without any problem. And of course then we can just leave this if we wanted to drive away in the next day. That would work really well like that as well. So time will tell as to how sort of functional this format is with the standalone tarp, whether we need a different kind of daytime shelter, something a bit easier to put up perhaps. This is a bit of a faff, especially if you're trying to do it by yourself. But you know, for the money, this is a really cool solution that gives us a kind of sheltered area for the daytime. I think they're about £60 from Decathlon. It packs down really small and doesn't take up any space or weight either, very light. What I like about this tarp is it's actually got this section at the back there that goes right down, so it's kind of a windbreak behind you. A lot of these tarps, they're kind of just the A-frame, you know, two sides, they don't really go down that low, so you haven't really got a proper windbreak solution. So this is wind and rain. It should work quite well in this configuration. If the wind is coming into it like this, it'll hit the back and you've got some shelter there.